Join me, and together we can rule the galaxy as father and son.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of As Father and Son, a podcast about Star Wars from what else? A father and son who are fans of the franchise. On this first episode, we're going to be talking about the first two episodes of the brand new Disney Plus show, The Acolyte. But first, we want to tell you a little bit about ourselves and what Star Wars means to us. My name is Robert. Many of you may recognize me from the Creepy and Geeky podcast. And I've been a lifelong Star Wars fan. I grew up loving the original trilogy. I was 3 years old when the very first one, A New Hope, came out, which for a long time it was just called Star Wars. And so, I had, I was the typical 80s kid who grew up during that time period. My parents didn't have a lot of money, so I didn't have a lot of the toys at the time. So that aspect of it I never really got into that aspect of it, but I love the movies. I've got to see, at least I know for a fact I got to see Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi in the theaters, but I'm pretty sure I saw Star Wars A New Hope in the theaters as well. And it's just been a lifelong love ever since. Star Wars has its ups and downs, and I'm still here with it and still enjoying every little bit of it that I can. Even when it's not the greatest, I still enjoy something out of each one. So that's who I am and what Star Wars means to me. And now my son Harrison, he can talk to you. That's a bad transition, but we're gonna go with it.
Okay. Yes, I am the son involved in the title of the podcast. And for me, Star Wars was kind of a similar tale. I was about 2 years old, or a little bit closer to three, when Phantom Menace came out. And I don't particularly remember if we went into the theaters while I was that young to go see it, but I do remember seeing Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith inside of theaters. And so I am very much the prequel generation child. So I have a huge appreciation for those movies with all of their flaws. And I played a lot of the video games when I was younger. This was like in the golden age of LucasArts. And so for me, that those games hold a very special place in my heart in terms of what Star Wars was when I was that age. I also, in my adulthood, have explored the universe in a greater degree just because Star Wars became such a huge part of who I am and what I'm a fan of and what I wanted to explore. And so now I've spent boatloads of my hard-earned cash on getting reference books as well as old RPG books, new RPG books to just kind of get into every aspect of the universe, reading Legends books and just kind of reading a lot of those things that I saw growing up but didn't get into because I was not a reader. Because particularly remember the New Jedi Order series coming out during my entire childhood, and I just never touched those books. But I'm excited because I'm burning through what's available in Legends formed, and I'm very close to getting to the New Jedi Order and kind of making up for lost time.
Yeah, no. So he grew up with Star Wars in the house because obviously me being a fan of it, it was one of those things that I tried to introduce to both of my children early on. And it was one of those things where, I didn't try to push it on them. I tried to let them, they were exposed to it, and they came to it at their own pace. That's how I've always believed in doing that with the kids in general, is let them explore and find out what they love for themselves. And in fact, Harrison has become an even bigger fan. Like he said, he's become an even bigger fan because I haven't delved into a lot of the games and the RPGs and all of that. I've read some of the books, but he's even gone beyond me in terms of that kind of stuff as well.
Well, and
So
for going back to your comment about how it was in the house, right,
yeah,
we can't skip over the fact that in terms of it being inside the house, it was inside the house. Like you were definitely the kind of person to be collecting like all of the like Burger King, McDonald's toys, like
yes,
Taco Bell
yes.
toys
I
around
was
Phantom
I
Menace. You had tons of collectibles in the house, and
I had
I
a
grew
big
up
box
with
of all
a
that stuff.
Naboo
That's funny.
Starfighter float that
Yeah.
in a uh, spur of the moment eBay childhood wish fulfillment in adulthood I have purchased for my own son. So I
Despite the
also have this.
trauma of it,
Oh
because
yes.
when he
It
was
had
2 years
unfortunately flipped
old,
over when I was
it flipped
two
over in the
and got
pool and he
trapped under
panicked.
the. Yeah, I got trapped under it for
He
just a
wasn't
moment.
trapped under it. He wasn't trapped under it. He was literally under it for like a second, bobbed up. He was totally fine, but he freaked out.
I mean, were
And I
you in the
actually,
pool underneath the float, or was I under the pool?
I was in the pool right next to you as it happened. So,
Okay.
mhm.
Well, in any case, I think that we eventually have to get started on talking about the episode.
Well, I mean, I'm sure people will love to hear that stuff, but
Oh yeah,
we want
we
to,
got to save some Star
you
Wars
know,
stories for later.
yeah, we got to regale people along the way. So, but yeah, so that's where we come at it from. We're big, both lifelong Star Wars fans, um, and we literally have we when we talk about the new things, or even we'll talk about the old stuff all the time, and
Hmm.
we will have very long 2 3 hour long conversations.
Yep.
And it just was natural for us to go, you know what, let's actually make a podcast about this so that we can actually talk about it, and maybe other people will be interested in what we have to say. Maybe not,
Well,
but
yeah.
we're gonna find out.
It not to just say that people who talk a lot should make a podcast about Star Wars because there's a lot of people who talk for 3 hours about Star Wars. But I
True.
tend to believe that for us as Star Wars fans, we even if you even if I've delved into it to a further degree than you, for the both of us, I believe that Star Wars is something that we enjoy and it is media, but we do not frame our entire personalities or our
Oh no.
entire beings around it to the point where some people inside of the fandom seem to do, where they get very upset when certain things happen or certain things don't happen inside of whatever is coming out or what has come out
Right.
before. Because I mean, even during the prequel era, when I was a kid, I was very aware as a kid of the prequel hate, and
Yeah.
I didn't see it at the time. I still don't see it. But uh, it's that kind of hate and vitriol that we've thankfully never had in any of our conversations. And so I
No.
think
And
that
you won't hear that kind of stuff on this
no,
podcast either. I'm just telling you that right now. There might be things that we might not enjoy
we're going to be
aspects of,
passionate.
or anything like that. Yeah. Well, and even then our passion isn't going to be in some form where it's going to be negative in a way that is like that toxic hate type stuff that people do, because that's not who we are as people.
No,
And that's not how we are as fans, because we enjoy Star Wars, warts and all, like, and we recognize that Star Wars itself has always had ups and downs, and we're going to go through these too on this podcast, not specifically this episode, but along the way we're going to be talking about all of the movies, maybe some of the TV shows, stuff like that. And we're going to really get into it and talk about all those things, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And, we want you to hear it from maybe, hopefully, a different perspective, a more positive perspective. And that's where we're coming at it from on this podcast, especially. And that's why we wanted to do it. because we wanted to be another voice out there, another positive voice out there, and to show that you can enjoy it, and even not enjoy it sometimes, but still come at it with a respectful, and still loving kind of thing, because we
And
love
to
Star Wars as a whole, even though it's like, when you love a person, you love them despite maybe some of their flaws. It's the same with Star Wars. We love Star Wars despite some of its flaws.
yeah, ultimately, to elaborate further on that, we're not saying that we are, essentially what we are saying is we are not in any camp within the Star Wars fan base. We're not part
No,
of
no, no.
the Disney haters, the
Nope.
like George apologists, the
Right.
we're not part of any like fandom group. We are just going to present our opinions and our thoughts on the Star Wars brand, where it's going, where it's been, and hopefully
Exactly.
we have some interesting conversations with that, and hopefully we get some great engagement with you guys online on
Yes,
your thoughts,
absolutely.
and hopefully develop a really good positive dialogue about Star Wars that can hopefully kind of outweigh a lot of the noise that
Yeah.
is among the fandom that is either just hateful to be hateful or just straight up trolling. and
Right. Exactly.
and so that's where we're coming from with this, is that we're going to be critical. There will definitely be things where
Absolutely.
we disagree on stuff. If we ever talk about the sequel trilogy, that'll definitely bring up some
Well,
thoughts. If we
and that's
bring
at
up the
what
prequel trilogy, that'll bring up some thoughts. If we
no,
talk
and
about
that's the
the
thing.
original trilogy, there's some
Harrison and I
thoughts.
disagree with each other a lot too. So about what we like and don't like about each one of these eras, and even in the same movies and stuff like that. And that's what's good about it. We
Hmm.
we have good, respectful conversations amongst ourselves that get passionate, but don't like tip over into like hateful like things. And so that's what we're going to be bringing to this podcast as well. Is basically it's just going to be our same similar conversations, just to a broader audience, and
Yeah.
hopefully not annoy our family as much anymore.
Yeah. Give it an outlet where uh our wives don't have to deal with us talking about it within
Right.
earshot.
Exactly. So, but all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the Acolyte. We're going to talk about episodes 1 and 2 on this episode, because they both dropped at this on the same date, and they're kind of a piece of each other. It's like a 1-2 punch altogether. So,
And we're
we're not
just
really
trying to
gonna.
be timely with that. We're like,
Yeah.
rather
So
than talk about the original trilogy, it'd be one more podcast
right,
among 1,000 that talks about the
right,
original trilogy.
and we will
We
get
just kind
there.
of wanted to get involved with where the brand is now and
Right.
talk about what the big thing is, what the big conversation is, because there's a lot of talk about the Acolyte, and some of it is
Some of it's good,
decent,
some of it's bad,
some of it's bad, some
and
of
some of
it,
it's things people aren't talking about that we want to talk
yeah,
about. And so that's a
yeah, there's
major
lots of
part of what we're
things
going to get into. Yeah.
we've talked about that I haven't seen online anywhere else, and so I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah. So, and we will eventually get to a lot of those other things. The original idea for this podcast was to go, kind of forward from A New Hope onward. And the podcast is going to come out normally monthly, probably. Um, just because of schedules and timing and stuff. But we're going to
Mhm.
try to make these Acolyte ones weekly while they're
Yeah,
happening. So there'll be a new,
absolutely.
fresh episode of our podcast within a couple of days after the new episode
And I
drops.
think for any TV show or any kind of repetitive
Yeah, we're going to
content
try to
like
do
that,
that.
we'll try to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, so let's go ahead and get into it. The Acolyte episode 1. Um, which was again called, and I forget now offhand.
I believe it was Judgment and something else.
No, it is Lost Found.
Oh, right. I'm thinking
So,
episode 2.
so this series, by the way, is created by Leslie Headland, who was the co-creator of the Netflix show Russian Doll. So there are a few actors who've migrated over from Russian Doll over onto here. Most notably, Master Vernestra and Yord. Those two actors that play them came over from um, that Netflix show, and then of course Master Saul is played by um, um, the actor who was on Squid Game on Netflix
Yes.
as well. So yeah, so there's a lot of cool stuff. The main character is played by Amanda Stenberg, who most people would probably recognize as Rue from the original Hunger Games movie. Um, and she plays a dual role in this as Osha and her sister May. So, and we're going to get into that because in the beginning we're and I don't want to do a whole episode by episode, like a moment by moment kind of recap in all these, but I kind of got to get into this a little bit because in the beginning we're presented with this person who is going to is challenging this Jedi master named Master Andara, and it played by Carrie Ann Moss from The Matrix, which is awesome.
Mhm.
And she challenges her to a fight. And it's a good fight. Um, not gonna lie, that was a very cool
Yeah.
Jedi fight. But she during the course of it, she makes some statements here and there, like Jedi, uh, because the Indara doesn't uh, rise to her bait to attack her, and she goes, Jedis don't attack unarmed people, and um and this person says, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Which is and then Master Indara's like, the hell, man. Um, and so during the course of the fight too, she says this thing too, like when Master Indara ignites her lightsaber, she goes, "A Jedi is um, only draws their lightsaber when they plan to kill," and which is interesting because I did see something today about that. That is not something that is regularly done in the Star Wars that we know of, even by the time of the prequels, which is about 100 years after this um, show. Uh, the Jedi just whip out their lightsabers willy nilly anytime. So
Hmm.
it's not something that is, you
Yeah,
know,
there isn't some kind of
yeah,
association
yeah. So it
with
seems
the
like
use
at
of a
least in
lightsaber.
yeah, so it seems like in this time period, the Jedi are a little bit less, and here's where it comes down to. I saw somebody basically say that the Jedi in this show are kind of like space cops. And it's kind of like that in that way where a, a cop is not supposed to draw their gun unless they're prepared to shoot. And and it should be a very measured thing. Like there's no reason to shoot unless you feel that that's the last resort for you. And that's the
Hmm.
same with in this moment with this Jedi too. So I thought that was a very interesting correlation for that as well, especially given this whole space cops thing going on in this one.
Yeah, I when it came to that line, it reminded me actually a lot of Dune because in
Mm,
Dune, the use of a crysknife is a sacred act. If you unsheath a crysknife, you cannot resheath it until blood has been spilt on it.
mm, okay.
And uh, inside of Dune, if they do unsheath their blade, they and do not end up killing someone with the blade, they end up having to cut their own hands in order to put
Oh,
it back inside of their sheath. And
interesting.
so for me, that line kind of stood out for myself as someone who's read Dune and appreciator of the movies that came out recently, that it was a very much kind of a hearkening to the Dune inspirations of Star Wars. Though
Right.
I do really like the interpretation of the idea that the Jedi are acting very much like a police force in this time of peace, because there
Yes.
is no Sith, there is no greater threat that the Jedi are having to deal with. I know that in some of the High Republic novels, there is a threat. I believe it's the Nihil. I haven't unfortunately read any of the High Republic
I have
novels
not
or
either.
dealt with any of the comic books, but I am aware that there was sort of a threat, but I don't know the full extent in which the Jedi fought against them. And so I don't know how much that line that, as you said, this character that we haven't quite had a name reveal yet for is referencing in terms of other High Republic knowledge.
Right.
But it does stand out, like you said, against the rest of the franchise because
Yeah.
they ignite lightsabers all the time.
Yeah. For anything
Because
and everything.
it's equally usable as a tool or a weapon. And to hear it very much used as a weapon only in terms of this show, it was a very interesting thing to hear. Something also that you kind of skipped over by talking about the fight scene that I found interesting in regards to the lightsaber is that this character, this Sith
Yeah.
assassin or whatever she is, she was trying to get a hold of the
Yeah. She
lightsaber
was
that
trying to
Master
grab it.
Nagar wore.
Yeah.
And something that arises a little bit later inside of the scene is that when she has an opportunity to grab it with no resistance, she does not grab it. And so there is some
Yeah.
kind of earning aspect, like you have to steal it in terms of whatever her mission and whatever her goal is, for her to be able to either move on or complete her mission in regards to this. And so I found that very interesting that she can't just pick it up. The
Yeah.
some I did see someone online say that it could be in reference to there is a Darth Vader comic in which, in order to bleed a crystal, because now in the new canon, synthetic
Yeah.
red crystals are not how lightsaber, like how Sith sabers work. You have to bleed a color crystal to red, and there is some Vader comic in which Vader had to take a lightsaber from a Jedi and bleed it to get his red crystal, I believe.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
so there could be something in that she is trying to get a hold of this lightsaber crystal in the middle of a fight so that way she can forge her own Sith saber, but will not be able to until she can earn it.
Right. Right.
And so that's very interesting because that also lends credence to some theories about a character that's revealed a little bit later, where there's a lot of controversy over if a character is a Sith or just some other kind of dark sider, and if the case may be that this Sith assassin character is doing this for that purpose, then that's good evidence that that individual that we see later on is in fact a Sith of some kind.
Right. Yeah, and that I mean that gets to the kind of the crux of everything so far that we've seen with these two episodes is that we're not positive what kind of a force user that this person is. Um and it this is this the beginning of a Sith um uh emergence or reemergence, or is this something else? And that's what I find fascinating about it as well, is this is um they're not being so kind of black and white about it. They're kind of leaving things gray, and I really like that because there are a lot of different ways to use the force, and they've started exploring that within the last decade or so, and I like that they're continuing with that. So, and I hope they can definitely keep continuing with it as well.
which is something that came up a couple times inside of Legends. There is a couple instances in which there are Force cults of some kind in terms of different religious beliefs around the Force. And so it
Right.
is nice to see that in canon we are seeing some more of that. I think the first instance of that we saw was the some kind of Jedi temple on Jeddah in Rogue One,
Yes. Yeah.
where there's some kind of non-Jedi worshiping of the Force.
Yeah, the
Uh,
Guardians of the Wills and stuff.
yeah,
So
so
yeah.
that's definitely an interesting little factor of it. And yeah, for me going into this show, I definitely had a preference in terms of hoping that the character we saw in the trailers with the red lightsaber and the skull-like mask was a
Right.
Sith, because I enjoyed the idea that we're going to see some behind the scenes Sith interactions with the Jedi in the period before Phantom Menace. And so I'm interested to see how this plays out, because I think that this Sith assassin character that we see in the first episode is very much playing a like an Asajj Ventress role in terms of the Sith hierarchy,
Right.
in that it's not necessarily an apprentice, but also not necessarily a Sith either. And so there's a little bit of gray area, almost like plausible deniability, that the Sith always like to have whenever the apprentice of the Sith master has some form of Sith assassin, where they'll just say, "Oh, it was just an assassin. I wasn't trying to get an apprentice to take over your
Right.
position." And so I think that that's kind of where this character is, that's hunting down Indara, in terms of her motivations and her skill level, that she's kind of playing this role. And so when we do see that character a little bit later on in that episode, that character to me is very much stands out as not the Sith Master. It
Right.
seems very much that that individual is using the Sith assassin to further their own gains, and so I'm interested to see how that kind of culminates, and if there will be a confrontation between the Jedi and the Sith individual. And then, of course, that will have ramifications for the line that everyone mentions that Ki-Adi-Mundi says inside of Phantom Menace about the Sith not appearing in the last 1,000 years. And
Right.
so it'll be interesting to see how that gets resolved if there is a Sith and Jedi interaction.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I'm excited to see in either way. If it's Sith, that's fine. It'd be interesting to see just where exactly they're going with it. And hopefully they don't um you know fumble the landing on it. That's all I
Yeah.
want.
I mean, so
Um
far they have me very intrigued in terms of the relationships between these characters. I personally
right.
really, like I said before, I grew up in the prequel era. And so for me, this is the stuff that I love. I love the dichotomy of the Sith and the Jedi. I love the Sith working inside of the background and developing their plots unseen and being right underneath the nose of the Jedi. And one of my favorite characters in canon is Asajj Ventress. And so having this Sith assassin character working in the same capacity as an Asajj Ventress is very cool to see.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no. So it's that's how we're introduced to her. She does manage to kill Master Indara,
Hmm.
which, and this goes into something that we talked about before we came on the show, but I wanted to have you talk about it a bit, because it in the movies, in the at least in the original trilogy, when a Jedi died, they disappeared and became a Force
Hmm.
ghost.
Yes.
And then in the in the prequel trilogies, the Jedi died and just died, and didn't do that. And this happens as well. Master Indara dies, her body just falls to the ground and
Mhm.
doesn't vanish or doesn't become a Force ghost, because as we all know, that didn't happen until Qui-Gon Jinn figured it out. So,
Yeah, at
you know,
least in
at
the
least in canon, yeah,
post Revenge of the Sith new canon.
right. Because you've been reading a lot of the um legend stuff, you said that it happened quite a bit in those, that anytime a Jedi died, they would, Force ghost, or not Force ghost, but they would disappear. Their body would disappear.
Well, yeah. So inside of a lot of Legends novels, and this is likely because the only examples of a Jedi Master dying that they had were Yoda and Obi-Wan fading away. In almost every instance inside of a Legends novel before the prequels, a Jedi Master would always fade away into nothing. And coincidentally, any Darksider that would die would always explode in a halo of blue fire, like the Emperor does at the end of Return of the Jedi. And
That's funny.
so it was very interesting in terms of what they thought was the intention in terms of some of the imagery that shows up inside of the movies. And so when Qui-Gon dies and then has his funeral pyre, that is somewhat of a kind of a culture shock in terms of
Right.
the Legends continuity, to now have to kind of explain how all these people were disappearing. And so that's kind of a fun thing that occurred as a result of Phantom Menace. And so it is interesting that they're continuing that trend inside of the Acolyte, that Jedi at this time are not aware of how to do this. And we also see some interesting things about Jedi death inside of the Clone Wars too, in that inside of the Jedi Temple, there's a catacombs inside of
Mm,
the Jedi Temple where Jedi are buried, and they kind of get lowered into a recess in the floor that then closes, and then a beam of light shoots up into the ceiling. And so we see that a couple times inside of the Clone Wars when a Jedi dies. And so that's very interesting in terms of kind of the relationship with the Jedi and the Force at this time, that
right.
it seems as though those who would have a stronger connection with the Force can join the living Force and fade into nothing in the way that Yoda, Obi-Wan, and eventually Qui-Gon did post-death.
Right.
And it seems as though the people that are blinded by some kind of restriction or some kind of pride or kind of materiality, whatever it is, cannot transcend or like find enlightenment in kind of like a Buddhist way, to join the Force, that they will just die as crude matter, as Yoda would say.
Right. Right.
And so not many people get to be luminous beings
Right.
unless they went through that extensive training. And so that is interesting, as there is some Jedi death throughout this show. And it
Yeah.
is the kind of like central plot. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
so it'll be interesting to see how this all kind of develops, and also to see if any Jedi do disappear,
Yeah.
because that would
Yeah.
be interesting, to
Yeah.
see if there is any Jedi that do disappear and have some kind of transcendent moment when they end up moving into the Force.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this Sith assassin kills Indara, and then we cut to a new place where we are aboard a starship,
Yeah.
where we
Right after the
see,
titles. Yeah.
yep,
So you get a little moment to go, okay, breathe for a second, and then
yeah,
boom, somebody wakes up and it's literally the same person, or
yeah,
so we think.
or yeah, or so we think.
Yeah.
And we see them kind of move about their kind of daily existence as some kind of ship mechanic on a Trade Federation starship within the corporate sector, where we see some Nemoidians and a couple other cool reappearances from the prequels, as well as some cool Legends references that are somewhat now a little bit stronger recanonized because the corporate sector was introduced inside of the book Han Solo at Star's End, inside of the Legends continuity, and then sort of recanonized in Andor with
Yeah.
the corporate kind of space that Andor starts in. And then with this, we get a direct reference to the corporate sector, though, where she says that she's working for corporate sector or CorpSec. And as part of that, she is on a Trade Federation starship.
Right.
And she is acting as something called a mechanic, which I don't believe we've heard of in anything else, where
I
it's
don't
basically
recall. Yeah.
a human astromech, so a human R2 unit that has to EV and walk across the side of a starship to fix repair. And essentially, it's you go out there, you get paid for it, and I would assume is cheaper for the Trade Federation
I
than just getting a droid.
you would think they would get hazard pay because they're not. And here's what I would think too is I
Well, not in the
think
corporate
that
sector.
yeah, maybe not. So, but I would think, the like she says, she explains this later, is that it's because she is more flexible than a droid would be in that situation. And so, and maybe there's a precision that she could do that maybe a droid couldn't do in certain situations anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as we've seen with R2D2, I think that would be very unlikely. So
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I do like the idea of it. I like the idea of
yeah.
EV mechanics working on a ship on the exterior. Also, before we get too much further, we have to address the elephant in the room that has taken over a particular subset of the fan base. Yes, there was fire in space, but
Yes.
also it is Star Wars, where there
Right.
is fire, sound, laser beams,
Right.
space magic, and a whole lot of other things in
Yes.
space.
Yeah, and
That
that's the thing. I read an article today that directly addressed this because I guess people have been weird about it and have been like, "Oh, there shouldn't even been fire. It's in a vacuum, blah blah blah." It's Star Wars. Star Wars has never been one to hold to science facts. It is science fiction. Barely. It's science fantasy. And
yeah,
that's how George Lucas has always painted it, and that's how everybody else who's worked on it has done it as well, because there's no sounds in space. We wouldn't be hearing TIE fighters or the jets of, the whatever, not
X
jets, but
wings or
the
hearing the
boosters of
engines of
anything. Yeah.
yeah.
So we wouldn't be hearing any of that. We wouldn't be seeing anything exploding. Things would just, poof, and then they'd be
But
gone.
man, would that make
Um,
a boring sci-fi movie?
exactly.
Because the
So
sounds of Star Wars are some of the best sounds ever made, and
exactly.
and so it's
So
ultimately it's a lot of people getting mad over very little tiny
I
things.
honestly, sometimes it's again, when we get down to it, I think it's just people being weird, like just to like say stuff just to hear themselves, and honestly,
Yeah.
not even that, but for engagement, they want to say something. Oh, there was fire, and just so they get the hits, just so they can get everybody going. Oh no, it's this thing, that blah blah blah. Don't engage with it. The person's being a troll, trying to get engagement clicks. Don't do it. Just
Yeah, yeah.
understand. Star Wars is fantasy. It's not science fiction. It's not science fact. It's science fantasy. At
Now
the very most.
here's the deal. When I saw the fire, I did go, how's there fire in space? But but for me, I immediately rationalized it by going, well, maybe that thing that burst is an oxygen tube.
Yeah,
And that's what's being ejected, is that it got like there's some kind of spark that lit up the oxygen tube, exploded it, and so now it's flaming out.
Yeah, and it's not like
And
the
so,
fire was going everywhere. It was a localized fire
yeah,
that was burning
yeah.
in one place. It's not like it was spreading. If it had been spreading, sure, then I would have been like, maybe it's a little funky. But even then, it wasn't. It was a
Also,
localized
it was just a
event.
cool scene. And
It was all it was there for was to get her to have that PTSD moment
yeah.
and to like you know like focus in on that. That was all that was there for. Like again, let it go. It's
Well,
a
and in that,
it's
after that, I think that's a good segue into just letting it
yeah,
go and moving on to the rest of the episode. We then are introduced to what is a new starfighter for film media, but it
yeah,
appears inside of the High Republic novels. But I believe that this is a different model than the one that has been previously depicted. But we get to see a Vector starfighter, which is apparently the kind of like Jedi starfighter of this era, and so that was pretty neat. I did really enjoy the design of it. It looks very unique and very kind of
yeah,
elegant and elongated, almost kind of like a flying like water bug or some kind of like moth in a way.
right.
And so that was kind of a neat thing. I'm a sucker for ships, and so anytime I see a new ship, like for example, the Trade Federation ship looked uh sufficiently corporate and brutalist, which I enjoyed. And so there
Yeah.
was anytime we get to see new ships,
All
for
function, no
example,
form.
a little bit later inside of the this episode, we get to see a Jedi shuttle in which they have a little bit more space, almost kind of like a Millennium Falconish sized ship, and that one I really enjoy the look of as well.
Yeah, no, it's ship designs are good. It's definitely, when you got to remember this is 100 years before uh Phantom Menace, roughly. And so, ship designs are going to be a little bit different. So we're not going to be to the stage that they're at in Phantom Menace. And plus, it's just different time, different place, different things. Um, so
Which is good to
and it's
see
no,
because
it's more fun that way because you're getting to
yeah,
see different time periods and you're getting different ships. So it's not the same ships we're used
it
to.
makes it feel
And
more unique. It isn't the same stuff that we've always seen, and
and
so
it's
that's
organic that way.
yeah, it makes the world feel more real, and that these time periods are distinct, and that we should care about this High Republic time period and what it has, and and this was one of and still is one of my greatest complaints about the sequel trilogy is that they played it very safe by still having X-wings and TIE fighters and didn't really alter the
Right.
designs too much. And Mon Calamari cruisers and the Star Destroyers that look basically the same. And so there's a couple things like that where I'm very happy to see that as we've seen in newer shows like Andor and um, the Acolyte as well as Ahsoka, we've been seeing some newer ships, which is cool to see. It's nice to see things evolve because that's one of my favorite things about Legends is having things evolve, which Legends is also very, very bad about egregiously using TIE fighters and X-Wings. But one of the things that they would like to do inside of Legends a lot is they had a fighter craft called Uglies where they would smash parts together. So there would be a TIE fighter cockpit, but with X-Wing wings. And so there was a lot of stuff like that. And there
Right.
were a ship called the Die Wing, which was a TIE fighter cockpit attached to a um, Y Wing engines. And
Right.
so it's nice to see them create new ships for this era because it does make it feel more alive in the same way that the Uglies in the Legends continuity made that feel alive in the idea that a lot of these like pirate factions and a lot of these independent factions in the post Imperial era would just kind of kit bash these parts together from the war. So they would just salvage all these parts from the Galactic Civil War and make these ships as their like snub fighters. And so it's cool to see that inside of the High Republic, you get these very unique, very kind of immediately recognizable Jedi ships to the point where even the Neimoidians on the vessel immediately recognize it as a Jedi ship
Right. But
and
they have
start.
the same they have the same disdain for Jedi that they do later on as well. So
Yes, yes. Which is a testament to the ethics and morality of the Trade Federation that they
right.
are afraid of the moment when the space cops, as you put it forward, come in.
Yeah.
But with that
Well,
said, though, when
real
they
quick.
do come in,
Okay, real quick. Let me go back
yeah.
though before we
Oh,
jump
sure,
into
sure.
that
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I forgot to mention the droid that
Yeah, the
OSHA has
multi-tool.
the multi-tool which she calls Pip. So I love that. I love that they keep continuing on with this where they introduce new little droids here and there, like Leia's droid that she has in the Kenobi
Mm.
series. And so this little Pip droid is the best multi-tool ever. It's a welder,
Yes,
it's a
yeah, yeah.
fire extinguisher, it's a like a sonic screwdriver later.
Yeah, yeah.
It's an amazing tool, and it's got a personality all its own, which I love too. You gotta love these droids having personalities, even if they're minor things here and there. It just makes it a lot more fun for the show. So I just
Well, and
wanted to
it's also
call
one
that
of
out.
our first clues that this character we're seeing is maybe not quite the same character we saw on the
Exactly.
planet within Dara, because this character is showing a lot of affection for this droid, whereas the person we saw on the planet within Dara was very much not someone who would show affection for really much anything. And
Right.
so it was nice to have that moment where it kind of immediately makes us start to question on what is reality and what is the truth of what's going on, which is going to be a running theme throughout the show up until what we've seen so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I but now we can get back into what you were about to say about
Yes,
the
so
Jedi writing.
the Jedi are abusing their power, to put
Oh,
it simply.
very much so.
uh, having their first interaction to immediately use a kind of mind, like almost a information pull from someone's
Yeah,
mind,
they're
which
invading their mind to get the
surprised
information.
me a lot,
Mm-hmm.
because and this is one of the things that some people are talking about online, but not a whole lot of people are talking about. And I find this to actually be one of the more interesting things about the show is that the Jedi are using the Force in a way that we did not see them use it inside of the prequels, even
Yes.
to the degree of mind tricks and other things that we did see in the prequels. But they're using techniques that we've only ever seen Darksiders use, and especially this information pull technique. This is something that, at least in my memory, only Kylo Ren has ever used, where he pulled the
Right.
information out of Poe's head inside of Force Awakens. And so seeing the Jedi do this and having the Neimoidians in the fear of having it even happen to them, just immediately like break out of their lie that they don't have OSHA, the ship mechanic, on board the ship, to avoid even having it happen to them, is definitely very significant and something that should not be taken very lightly. It
Right.
shows that the Jedi in this peacetime have become very arrogant, very free with their manipulation of the Force, and very pompous in terms of their role in the galaxy and their authority over other people.
Absolutely.
And I think that they do it in a sense of believing that they're doing the right thing, and
Well,
that they,
that they're the moral authority,
yeah, exactly. And
that
that,
what they do is always correct.
like, they are the servants of the light side of the Force, so everything they do
Right.
must be within the purview of it. And this leads into a lot of other things that come up later inside the show where there is a lot of questioning of the Jedi's methods as well as the Jedi's usage of the Force as well as their actions that ends up coming up a little bit later. And I'm excited to talk about it because there's a couple things that I think that people have kind of overlooked at times in terms of the discourse of the show that I've seen. And so I'm
Right.
excited to continue talking about specifically this topic about what the Jedi are doing and what this could mean for the future of the show in terms of how they are using the Force.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, we're talking about all this about what's going on with the Jedi, and I think we're going to get more into that in the rest of the season as well, hopefully anyway. Because this is a different view of the Jedi, not like a completely different view, but a slightly different view that we've gotten from them before. They seem to be a little bit more cavalier with their force abilities, especially in terms of, like we mentioned, in terms of um using mental things, like trying to get information from people and such. So which I felt like, that just seems like an invasion, more so than they seem to do, like, other than Jedi mind tricks, which is, sure, that's not the greatest of course, but and Luke obviously, making like Bib Fortuna say what he wants him to say and stuff like that. That was kind of
Mm-hmm.
iffy at best as well.
Yeah.
But by and large, what we've seen represented by the Jedi has been fairly, I would say, more on the up and up. But these guys, this Jedi, this version of the Jedi seems to be a little bit more. I don't know. It's just weird.
They're
And
they're
so it,
they're the Jedi who have not had anything to challenge them for
yeah, and they have no,
900 years.
yeah, and they are not under Senate purview either. So they have no, they
That's
have,
my theory. That's my theory
yeah,
is that there is no Senate oversight because there's a
yeah,
line that Vernestra Rose says inside of the first episode regarding that the scandal of the death of Master Indara and whatever happened on Brendok could be used by their political enemies in the Senate, which is a
exactly.
very interesting line, which I think will have a lot of import as the season goes along
Right,
in terms of defining the relationship between the Jedi and the Republic to the point where we see it inside of Phantom Menace, where the Chancellor is sending the Jedi off to go deal with the
right,
trade dispute. And so they're more
right,
a directly controlled by the Senate and as well as the Chancellor, more servants of the Republic rather than what it seems like in this, where they
right.
seem kind of extra like
Extrajudicial,
yeah,
maybe. But
yeah,
this
some
also
some
might be
form
stuff
of
that's
extrajudicial uh organization that acts outside of the government.
right. And this might be something that's being explored in the books and the comic books as well, that
Mm-hmm.
neither one of us are
Unfortunately.
have checked out yet. So there are aspects of the High Republic. This is our, at least for me, this is my only experience with the High Republics up until this point. So,
Mm-hmm.
if listeners want to, school us on,
Yeah,
stuff, please,
anything you
please,
guys know in order
yeah,
to give us greater depth and understanding to the show as well as these
right.
relationships, and if there is anything inside of the High Republic about why the Jedi are acting this way, or if
Yeah,
this is a
just
new thing for the show.
yeah, you can point us in the right direction. Tell us which comic books and books that kind of talk about this, and we'll check it out.
Yeah.
Um, but I want to backtrack just a little bit to when Yord and his Padawan are talking to Osha on the Trade Federation ship. Um, there's a line where he's talking about how um like Osha brings it up and she says, "Why would I kill Master Indara?" And he says, "Well, she was the one who wanted you kicked out
Right.
because of," and then she cuts him off. So there's something that happened during her tenure as a Jedi, that one made her leave, and you know, I'm assuming of her own accord because it doesn't seem like she was kicked out. From everything anybody said, it seems like she left, but there was something that happened that made her want to leave. And so I'm curious
Hmm.
as to what that exactly was, and hopefully we'll get that during the course of this season. Hopefully it won't be something left over and to make us wait past this point. But I just wanted to
Yeah.
bring that up because it was one of
I
those
do
little
wonder
intrigues.
what the longevity of the series is going to be, if it's going to be multiple seasons or if the story's going to wrap after the finale.
Right. I guess it would just depend. I mean, who knows? I mean, we've still got as of this moment that we're talking, we still have 5 episodes left in this
Hmm.
season. So I mean, they could potentially wrap everything up nice and neat in a bow, but you know, maybe they're wanting to kind of parlay it into multiple seasons. Who knows? So
Yeah.
yeah. But so anyway, so she gets taken into the prison ship. There's a prison break, but just before that, like a prison ship break, which is fun and exciting. But there's a moment where one of the prisoners has this thing over his mouth, and one of the guys calls it a divik. My only experience with that word is, of course, in horror movies, where there was a really short time where there were like at least one or two movies that had that as a thing. And for what I knew of it, a Dybbuk was a Jewish like um, possessing spirit. Like it was a possessing spirit in Jewish mythology.
Mm.
I've since looked it up, and the word Dybbuk itself is also a is a Hebrew word meaning a case of attachment, or to adhere or cling. So maybe they're just using it as because it was clinging to his face. Maybe they were just using it in that way, and not necessarily the demon way or the possessing spirit way. So I don't know. It just seemed weirdly weird to me. And I just wanted to bring it up, and maybe see what other people thought of it.
Yeah, that was something I definitely did not catch.
Yeah.
I'm not as well versed in that as you.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, that I did find interesting about that scene, was the droid that was the warden or guard
Yeah.
that
The
she ended
guard.
up having to
Yeah.
walk with. He was a very interesting design. It was very almost like a proto protocol droid look to him, or like a
Yeah, he looked like a
proto
tough protocol
K2SO.
droid. Yeah.
And so it was cool to see, almost like a weirdly steampunky kind of droid in Star Wars.
Kind of a very old school, like what you would think of in like the old, like, I don't know, Buck Rogers era
Yeah, it
of
was
that
very
kind of stuff.
weird, like Forbidden Planet-y.
Yeah,
It
like a
was,
50s era
yeah,
like robot.
it
Yeah.
was cool. I really
Yeah,
liked the design.
definitely.
I thought it worked well for a pre-prequels
Yeah.
era
What I
droid.
what I really loved in that sequence was the pilots that ended up like going
Yeah, the
back
chair
into
droids.
basically chair and like making themselves into chairs. I thought that was very cool.
Which,
That
I
was a
mean,
it was a really
droids are
good
already
design.
pretty mistreated in the Star Wars universe. Do we have to sit on them? Like
Right.
that seems a little rude, but also it is
I
a
mean,
little airplane with the with the seat that's an autopilot.
yeah, yeah.
That was one thing that I was thinking of when I saw them. I was just like, this is just airplane.
Yeah,
So
except for they didn't blow up or shrink down or whatever. So,
yeah, yeah. But yeah, it was just a thought as I was watching it. There was a lot of interesting droids in the first episode,
yeah,
with Pip and then the security droid and then the chair droids. I don't
yeah.
think we've seen any other like significant droids in my
I
memory.
didn't yeah, I'm not remembering any offhand at the moment.
But it's been a good it's been a good showing of how this era is separate from
Yeah.
the other eras, and it has created its own unique period in my mind, and
Yeah.
that's been really nice, because I think that sometimes, I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, I think sometimes with Star Wars they don't do enough to really separate those eras, and so having different droids, different ships, different equipment, different
Yeah.
sounding things, having things maybe sound a little like tinnier and older than other things, that really helps out a lot. Because if everything just kind of sounds the same and looks the same, then you don't really get anything new, or it doesn't distinguish
Right.
itself.
Yeah. I mean, and to be fair, I mean, you're talking about, civilizations that have been around for a long time. And, at a certain point, technology would probably stagnate. That there wouldn't be any new real innovations for a bit.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Until, maybe some new ideas came along. And so, it
Certainly,
just
yeah.
takes some kind of upheaval, which does eventually happen with all of this. But yeah, no, I do enjoy being able to see this new world, this new timeline and stuff, and see how much it's the same and how much it's different. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, so after the prison ship breakout, Osha lands on a icy planet, or at
Yeah.
least in an icy section of a planet. That is one thing that always weirds me out about uh uh Star Wars at times, is that, like, they're only showing you one parts of these planets, but they always
Hmm.
make it seem like the planets, like Tatooine is all desert and Hoth is all snow and ice. And, it's like, do
Well,
these
yeah, I mean,
planets not
it's,
have multiple biomes? Um,
so they kind of do.
yeah,
In more, they go into it more in other books and other media and things,
right.
but even in the movies, Tatooine does have different biomes, because you have the Dune Sea, and then you have Becker's Canyon, you have
Yeah,
Mos
but I mean,
Eisley, so
still,
you
it's
have
like, it's very deserty, rocky. Like, there's no real,
yeah, yeah.
like, you don't see a
It's
lot
just
of
it's just
plants.
hot
There's
planet.
not. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a hot
It's
planet, and
it's
Hoth is a
even
cold
more
planet.
egregious in the prequels, because in the prequels you get like Sinkhole World, you get
Yeah,
uh and like Jungle Planet, and
yeah,
so, and Lava Planet, and so
yeah,
it's,
yeah, yeah.
but ultimately it comes down to, it's a space opera, and so as a space
Right.
opera, all of these places
They're just
are,
meant to be a thing, like
they're a
a
set piece.
setting.
Yeah, they're
Yeah, a
just a
set
set
piece,
piece for whatever story is trying to be
which is
told,
fine.
rather
Which
than
is fine. I just
trying to be
thought it was
real.
funny. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny too, because when you look at Naboo, I think in a couple of the shots you do see it has like polar caps, so it'd be interesting
Yeah.
to see that. And I think Naboo actually is one of the ones that has the most biodiversity, because we
Right.
see because we see the lake country, we see the swampland, we see the cliffs with the rivers. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think that
But again, but
is the
that
most.
falls into a very it seems like Naboo is just a very lush environment. When you're
Yeah, but it
thinking
has more
about it, it's
biomes
just
than Dagobah or
well,
Bespin.
true. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah. Swamp planet, gas planet. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, Yavin is just jungle planet with
Yeah.
ruins, and then
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, Yavin is Yavin 4, so it's like a moon around a planet. So
that's something
kind
also
of kind
that's
of like with Endor.
that's kind of, yeah, I was about to say, that's kind of something that's interesting about the way that they handle planets in the original trilogy versus the prequel trilogy, is that they had moons be the planets
Right.
that people were on more often than actual planets. But inside the prequels, we see more planets, and not
Right.
as many
Right.
moons. And then in this, I think there's a couple times when they're on a moon. I think I can't remember which one it is, but I think one of them is a moon of a planet.
Oh yeah. I couldn't say for certain right now.
Yeah.
Um,
But in any case, yeah. So she lands on this ice planet, and there's a little bit of a jump scare.
was there? I don't remember.
Yeah, if I remember, it creeped us out a little bit in the episode, where she sees like a girl run
Oh
by,
yeah.
and then it pans over and she's just standing.
Yeah.
in the doorway, and like it's a little creepy.
No,
And
no, that's definitely a nice little horror moment.
yeah,
Yeah.
which was cool because it was a dream sequence, and so it really
Yes.
gave that dream vibe where things aren't quite as what they seem, and things are
Right.
kind of not fitting the rules of physics.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's that was a cool sequence, and then the Jedi very quickly catch up to Osha,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah. Which I
the
wanted to talk a little bit about, not about their speed of getting to her,
yeah,
but of the while they are on their way to her, uh Soul's new Padawan, uh, talks to him about OSHA and everything like that. And I just
yeah, yeah.
it's interesting too, because I want the part I wanted to bring up is, and she brings it up earlier in the episode, is his seeming attachment to
Hmm.
OSHA, and he plays it off like, oh well, no, we got to be mindful of our pasts, so that we don't repeat them, blah blah blah. But it was just like, he obviously has a real attachment to OSHA.
Hmm.
They had an attachment of some sort, that he is, um still thinking of, and
Yeah.
all that. So it's something that I think is going to come into play multiple times throughout this
Which
season.
this is our introduction to Master Soul, is us
Yeah.
learning this information, and so I think that that is very important, as well as just
Yeah.
good character development in terms of introducing a
Yeah.
character to the audience and making us realize that he's compassionate, he cares,
Yes.
he's not above contradicting or finding loopholes within the Jedi Code,
Right. Yeah.
to allow himself to have the like the feelings and the emotions that he wants to have, while
Yeah.
still working within the framework of the Jedi. And so
Right.
there's a lot of good stuff like that about Master Soul, and
Right.
I think that's the reason why he's been latched onto by a lot of people in terms of their
Well, and
favorite
I think,
characters, because he's
yeah.
the most genuine of the Jedi, in that he's not an emotionless
Right.
automaton of
Like
the light
Yord.
side. Yeah.
And this just goes into, like, again, the kinds of Jedis that seem to have, um to be the most, to be the best in a lot of ways, are the ones who, at least with audiences as well, are the ones that have those attachments, or um are a little less rigid about those specific precepts. You've got Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan. Um, Anakin obviously was a little too attached, I guess. But I argue that Anakin's major problem is he never really had a chance to, I guess, grieve, or anything like that. But I mean, that's a whole thing we can get into on a later episode.
Yeah, I was about to
But
say,
but
we're
that's,
breaking open the Anakin can of worms.
yeah, we're not going there yet. But that's, I mean, but the actor who plays Master Soul, he is basing a lot of his character's nuances and stuff like that on Qui-Gon Jinn.
Hmm.
Because that was a character that he found attractive in that way, and wants to play a similar way.
And I'm
Not
sure
exactly
even
the same.
from reading the script, there was a lot of
Yeah,
potential to have him be a very Qui-Gon Jinn character.
exactly.
And it's a reason why Qui-Gon Jinn is my favorite character in Star Wars, is because he is one of the most genuine characters in all of Star Wars, to the point where he was so focused and confident in his beliefs and his viewpoint of the Force, and would not bow to the bureaucracy or the regulations of the Jedi Code if he felt that it did not fit his interpretation of the Force.
Right.
That
Well, and again,
it's inspiring. Like it shows that you can
yeah,
exist within uh, like a strict code of ethics, but have your own interpretation of those ethics that contradicts in some ways, but also does not contradict in the most important ways.
Right. But anyway,
And
we'll get
and we
more into
see that.
Qui-Gon
Well, I'm just
later
saying
on down
that
the road. But yeah,
that's kind of what Soul has as
yeah,
well. That's
exactly. Well, and I'd like to see what the connection is, if there's going to be any kind of connection from Soul down to,
yeah,
Qui-Gon,
it'd be interesting
and
if
seeing
there's
if
some kind of
Qui-Gon
Dooku
based any kind of
connection.
philosophy outside of that. So
Hmm.
no, it'll definitely be very interesting. Hopefully we'll see something like that. But I just wanted to bring that up because, you know, of Soul's seeming attachment to OSHA because it does crop up multiple times throughout
Yeah,
these episodes.
absolutely.
So and going back to what you said about how this little girl is, there and there's this dreamy sequence that it's something's going on for sure.
Hmm.
Um and this is something you brought up that I wasn't quite positive about, but you had brought up the possibility of a forced dyad.
Oh
Um
yeah, I personally am a strong believer that this is another forced dyad. So for those who are unaware of because they, I don't believe that they ever explicitly say it's a forced dyad inside of the movies, but
right,
inside of Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, any of those moments between Rey and Kylo where they're able to communicate across great distances and be able to interact with each other and pass items through the galaxy through some form of forced teleportation,
right,
all of that stuff is part of what is called a forced dyad, which is something that was defined, I believe, in some of the visual dictionaries as well as some of the other things that came out around those movies. And the idea of a forced dyad is that two people are so bound and connected by the force that they are able to communicate and see each other across the entire galaxy and interact with each other. And I strongly believe that what is happening inside of this show is another force dyad that is connected to them because they are twins and that they are, in some ways, a dark and light half of a yin yang equation, it
right,
seems. And so it's interesting, and I I am not someone who is a huge proponent of the idea of the Force dyad. I think that it's better used in this story than it was inside of the sequel trilogy as a
right,
as a kind of a as an idea, as a storytelling idea. I think that it's used better here. It makes more sense. It
right.
doesn't kind of leave the realm of plausibility. I think that in Star Wars, I'm not against having the Force do incredible things. But I do think that you have to earn those things as a storyteller, and I think that there was enough legwork done before the point in which this dream sequence occurs that when this dream sequence happens, it's intriguing and it makes us
Right.
want to know more and like what what is their relationship and how deep does it go to the point that they're able to communicate across such great distances, um, and also in some ways possibly not communicate to each other because there's something that occurs in the second episode that makes me doubt if they're even aware that they are communicating with each other
Yes.
or if there's something in which they are imagining these communications with each other. And these are just childhood memories reasserting themselves through the force or just through their minds. And that's an interesting thing as well because there's elements in the second episode that implies that May, the Sith acolyte, is not aware that Osha and her have been talking in these
Right.
instances.
Yeah.
Uh, but a lot of the thoughts and a lot of the emotions that May has were expressed inside of this conversation, inside of this episode, to Osha through this vision. And that is very interesting. I'm very, very interested to determine the actual relationship of this and if it is a forced diet on how it functions and how it differs from the one between Kylo and Rey. And if it's not a forced dyad, what is going on? Like, what are these visions,
Right.
and what new new thing is this exploring now? And
Right.
so,
And again, this goes into some stuff that we're gonna probably be getting into in a later episode, once we find out more information, of course,
mhm,
about who they are, and what their capabilities are and everything. So, but yeah, no,
certainly.
I tend to believe, similarly to you, that, like, as much as this might possibly be a forced dyad, it's definitely not something that May seems to be aware of, and it's not
No.
something that is fully conscious. I
Mm.
believe, if it is something that's going on like that. So it's definitely gonna be interesting for sure. So
Like I
um
said, and for those of you who may have not gotten as hooked to the show as we have on some of these, I hope that some of the discussion on some of these topics has hopefully intrigued you somewhat. As because
right.
I find this show very intriguing in terms of a lot of things. I find the relationship between the Jedi and the Republic Senate very interesting. I find this possible Force dyad very interesting. I find the secrets of what happened on Brendock very interesting. And so there's a couple mysteries here that haven't been fully answered, and I'm really interested to see how the story progresses towards those points.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Um, but like I said, the Jedi get to this ice planet very quickly, and
Yeah.
I was somewhat surprised at the pacing. I was expecting there to have to be
Well,
maybe some
because
clue
she lands
gathering
on the
on
planet. Well, she
where
lands
the
on the
prison
planet,
ship
and then,
went.
well, yeah, so she lands on the planet, and then somehow the other,
It
um
feels like
I
it's
mean,
minutes. I feel like it's
maybe.
minutes
So
between.
here's the thing. Maybe that planet, because they were on their way to Coruscant. So maybe
Yeah,
the planet that they crash landed on is pretty close to Coruscant.
yeah, it might be
So
in the same system.
because they already captured the escaped prisoners. They already have them back. Um and then,
Yeah,
um
maybe there's just a weird time
so
skip, but it just I don't
I don't
know.
think it's necessarily a big time skip. I just think they are pretty quick at it. It just feels, because we're so used
It's
to
very
there being
fast.
vast, like, space things where they have to go into hyperspace and do all this stuff all across. But again, I really think that it was a lot closer to um Coruscant by the time they figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
I ultimately I think that what was missing in terms of making it feel like the Jedi got there in a reasonable amount of time rather than kind of putting upon her as soon as she woke up from the ship, which is kind of how it felt.
yeah,
Um, it felt as though there should have been maybe a couple scenes where they were maybe in hyperspace for a while, like maybe a couple moments where they were in like the Jedi were in
right.
hyperspace, like maybe one scene. But I know that ultimately that scene is just filler to get them there, and the
Yeah.
story doesn't need that to progress because it didn't need it to progress in the
No.
episode, but it did feel very fast, and so
Yeah.
it wasn't a huge deal. Um,
No.
but then it ultimately leads into the chase sequence where Osha has to run inside of a cave and then has her fugitive moment.
Yeah.
I didn't kill any Jedi. And uh, which I swear there's a difference between the trailer and the show. There has to be a
I
difference because I feel like
I
it was way closer to that actual line than it was inside the episode because she just kind of like tips over and falls. She doesn't say much
I mean,
when she gets to the end.
she does, say that she
I
didn't
think
kill
she just says I
anybody.
didn't do anything or like I don't know.
I didn't kill anyone,
Yeah.
But
But
yeah. No. No, but it is a
but yeah,
good moment. I mean,
Soul
it's fun
Yord
to see.
and Jeki,
Yeah.
Padawan Jeki,
But it is fun to
captured.
have that little fugitive moment because everybody knows it, everybody recognizes
Yeah,
it. So
yeah.
it's really fun to kind of just have that uh
I don't
little
care.
bit there. Yeah. So but that leads into the very end. We see May. coming up in this I don't know,
Kind
this
of
other planet, wherever it's at.
like a kind of beachy,
Yeah,
oceany world, like kind of
it
a
kind of,
Octo kind of
yeah, I was
world.
gonna say it kind of reminded me of Octo.
Hmm.
But yeah, so she's
Yeah,
coming up, and
we
meanwhile,
should talk about
some,
the sequels a lot for
yeah,
people
yeah,
that aren't super engaged with them. But man, is it coming up a lot?
yeah. Well, I mean, some stuff informs other things.
Yeah,
So anyway, but it's definitely but this is where we see the, whoever this person is that supposedly that is like
it's a Sith Lord.
it's
It's
a,
a
well,
Sith
I
Lord.
mean, it's a Sith Lord, sure, we'll say it's a Sith Lord
He's
without
got a
any
red
evidence
saber. He's got a
without
creepy
any
mask.
evidence to the contrary, we will say it's a Sith
It
Lord
looks
for
like a
now.
skull.
So now,
He
don't get
doesn't
me
like
wrong, he's got a
Jedi.
cool mask. He's got a cool mask. Um, very, we don't get to see it in this, but we got to see it in the trailer. So,
Yeah.
we've definitely seen it
Well, and
already.
I really want to talk about what he says in that scene
Yes.
because I really like the line that he says where
Yeah, at the very end.
I think he says a little bit more than this, but I really like the two sentence line of an acolyte kills without a weapon, an
An
acolyte
acolyte
kills the
kills the
dream,
dream. Yep.
which is very interesting because I do not believe that it is literal. I do not believe that an acolyte kills without a weapon is necessarily literal, that an acolyte has to
Yeah,
kill without a weapon. But
yeah,
she
but this comes
does, but
into,
I don't
yeah,
think that that's what he's meaning. I think what he's saying is that
yes,
he wants to disrupt the peace that the Jedi are claiming exists. And
yes,
he is trying to upset that balance by using May as his acolyte to kill the dream of the Jedi.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
this is why I'm very, very interested in Vernestra's line about political ramifications, because I truly believe that this is going to be the catalyzing factor that ends up creating the situation in which the Jedi find themselves in the prequels that ends up ultimately causing Anakin's fall, is that they become so reliant on the Senate and the Chancellor that they can't even think that the Chancellor himself is the Sith Lord
Right.
because they couldn't be fooled, they couldn't be bamboozled, and I think that that's really what this is it's disrupting the dominance of the Jedi, their independence, their overt power that they've been applying to the galaxy in the ways that we've seen.
Right.
And I find this very, very cool. It's very interesting. It evokes a lot of the same themes that the Darth Plagueis novel introduced. There's also a little bit of Knights of the Old Republic 2 in this, which Leslie Headland has been on record saying was an inspiration for May's philosophy, which
Okay.
inside of Knights of the Old Republic 2, there's a character named Darth Treya who believes that the right thing for the galaxy is for the Force to die,
Mm,
and that the Force itself is a she's essentially a Force atheist, where she believes that
right.
the Force has a will, and who is the Force to decide the future or to disrupt the lives of the people of the galaxy. And so she
Right.
is essentially seeking to kill the Force. And so I think that it's very interesting that May is on a quest of killing these Jedi and disrupting the power that the Force has on the galaxy. And so I don't think that May necessarily has the same overarching goals or the same power that Darth Treya had inside of the video game in order to actually uh, concoct this incident. But I think that May is on a similar goal of trying to disrupt the status quo of the Force and people's faith in it.
Well, I don't think May has much in terms of outside of killing the 4 Jedi. Beyond that, I don't think she has any real goals. She's following this guy to accomplish her goals. I feel like
Hmm.
that there's no real.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I kind of agree with that. Where what is in it? What's in it for her? You know,
It's
I
just to kill these guys, and
well,
then
that's my
just to
thing.
kill
Is
these
why
Jedi,
does
and
the
then
Sith care?
once. Well, but the Sith, obviously, the Sith Lord, is trying to disrupt. That is
Yeah,
his goal.
yeah. I
He's
think he's
trying to
just using
disrupt.
her.
Yeah, he's just using her as a means to his end, and also helping accomplish her goals as well. He's seeing her goals as a necessary step, and so he's just helping to provide her with whatever she needs in that instance.
Yeah,
Giving her somebody to follow, basically, to hopefully help her get to that goal, because she can't do it on her own, maybe.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
but that
I'm
I think
just yeah.
that's it. I
I
don't think she has any overarching goals of taking down the whole Jedi or anything like that. She just wants to take down those 4, and that's it. She doesn't care
I'm
beyond
just
that.
so excited to see more Sith. I'm so excited to see more Sith in the pre Palpatine era,
Right.
and in the idea that they are in hiding, they're having to manipulate the galaxy in very subtle ways, and I'm very interested and excited about that because there's a lot of cool things that they can bring in with this kind of storytelling that I don't expect like direct Legends references, but already the fact that we're getting a lot of Legos elements in terms of how the Sith were manipulating the galaxy the entire time by undermining the Jedi, as well as making the Jedi subservient to the Republic. So then that way, all they had to do was take over the government of the Republic. And then at that point, the Jedi aren't even a problem anymore
Right.
because now they essentially own them. Which was always something that I found interesting is that Order 66 and the death of the Jedi wasn't Darth Plagueis's plan. That was Palpatine's plan because
Right.
Plagueis wanted to rule the Jedi in the shadows and
Yeah.
turned them into essentially a dark side puppet. And I think that's basically kind of where we're at in terms of the Acolyte. Is I think that whoever this Sith Lord is trying to turn the Jedi into Sith puppets in a way. I think
Right.
that they're doing that legwork to get them under the control of the Senate in order to do this. Now, all this is theory and speculation. I don't think there's really any evidence or anything to this, but I think that for me, this would be an interesting story. I think that
Yeah.
I would like to see it move in this direction. If it doesn't, that's fine. I'm sure I'll be surprised and either delighted or disappointed, as many other people would be.
Yeah.
But I'm not one of those people who bases their entire enjoyment of a show off of their theory.
Right. Yeah,
So,
I'm just along for the ride. I don't have any real theories right now. I just
oh
want to see
man,
where it
how do you
goes.
not have theories?
So,
There's so much
I
stuff.
mean, I obviously have theories, but again, yeah, same as you. My theories, I'm not going to be disappointed if my theories don't pan out.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm just like, if it happens, cool. But this is how I am with any media like this. Like, I'll have theories about things, but wherever it goes, whether it goes in a direction I enjoy or not, I'm gonna at least enjoy for the ride for a little while. Um, and see what happens, because sometimes you get to the end of a journey and the ending kind of is blah, but the rest of the journey was okay, so it's worth it. Um, and even if the end is, it depends on how bad the end is. But it's just, in this instance, for the most part, Star Wars has been enjoyable for me, even when there's been non-enjoyable things. I still will pick up pieces here and there to enjoy. And we'll get into that later, when we start getting into some of the movies and stuff again.
Yeah, yeah,
But let's go ahead and jump into the second episode, real quick.
yeah.
We already kind of talked about this. We probably don't have as much to talk about in this one. There's a lot of big things that happen in this. But there's not like in the first episode where there was a lot of little big things.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is like a few big things that we can hit real quick.
We got
So
hooked in the first episode. Now,
Yeah.
now we can just ease into the story and have things
Right.
revealed slowly.
So now in this second episode, she's going after Master Torben.
Yes.
And she finds him and on another planet.
Mhm.
And what is it? Olega?
Which also very interesting. Another Jedi temple on another planet.
Yes.
Which is a very interesting thing. I
So
like
this is
that they're
something that I
exploring
did.
that more.
So I did read this briefly. I was trying to do a little note taking, like kind of catching up a little bit on High Republic stuff. Is that during this era, they did have the center seat for the Jedi at Coruscant, but they had spread out into Jedi temples along all the planets that were part of the Republic.
Interesting.
So
okay,
yeah,
that's a lot of Jedi out there.
So it's kind of indicative. It's kind of feels similar to, like, say, the U.S. military. How
I was about to say,
we have our military here in the United States, but we have bases all around the world.
No, it's like little embassies
exert
everywhere.
or control. Yeah, kind of. It's kind of a mix between embassies and military bases in my mind.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so she gets there. She gets a little girl to help her get into the Jedi temple. And once she's in, she just kind of walks freely about. Nobody says anything. It was a little weird. I was like, what is, like,
I mean, I guess she looks sufficiently
Jedi-ish,
monastic
yeah,
in her robes. So
but yeah, so she gets in there, finds Torben, and tries to take him out. But he is surrounded by a force bubble.
Yes. Which we learn is a result of a sacred vow known as the Bearish Vow.
Yeah.
That is
he's been doing for 10 years.
Yeah, which is very interesting. And apparently it is essentially a act of penance or a act of
like contrition,
like absolute faith in the Force in order to directly commune with the Force for a extended amount of time. And so he has apparently been in it for so long that he now has a impenetrable field of the Force around him, protecting him from any physical sensation. And so that's a very interesting aspect. And this apparently was introduced in the Darth Vader comics. Actually, if I was remembering correctly, I think it's the one in which he actually has to steal a lightsaber in order to get his crystal. And so it has a direct connection to that.
Interesting.
And so it's a very interesting connection, if that is true. I can't necessarily say that is true because I haven't read the comic, but I've
read some of the comic books, but I don't remember that one.
But it was very interesting. I liked it a lot. I like the idea that someone is just so immersed in the Force that they've created this little bubble around them.
Yeah.
And so she fights his little Force bubble for a while, then decides to leave.
It's kind of comical, really, and I think it's I think it's meant to be played that way. She's trying to get through this Force bubble and doing everything, and just nothing's getting through. Not her, not her knives, nothing.
And then it becomes very dark later, which I am very interested to talk about.
Yes. So, but after that, she goes off to figure out a way to get access to him in a way. Yeah, an alternate method of getting to him. And so she finds this guy at an apothecary there on the planet. And it's somebody she knows. It's a man named Keimer, played by Manny Jacinto. For anybody who watched The Good Place, he played Jason on The Good Place. So very, very nice seeing him again. Much different character. And
which already upon meeting him, we know that he's not supposed to be there. That's not his shop.
No, it's not his shop. He literally says, he's wearing, because she asks,
he implies,
what is he wearing? He's like, oh, I'm trying to blend in. I took this from the guy who runs the shop,
who owned this place. Very past tense.
Yes.
It's there's a heavy implication that he killed the shop owner.
Right. And so this character is very interesting because there's multiple moments throughout the episode that lend you to believe he's not quite what he says he is and what he's portraying himself as. It feels like like in the beginning, he's kind of like, he knows her master also,
Yeah,
and
he
maybe
himself is,
subservient to him.
yeah, possibly some other acolyte or some other
Yeah,
servant of his in some way, or some kind
but
of
also
contact
seems
of
to be
his.
just yeah, it just seems but there's times where it just seems to be like an alternate, like, he does work for him on the side, not
Yeah.
necessarily for him, but he will work for him too. But he does seem to have a healthy fear of him in a way. um
Yeah, but and
Maybe
then
not
he
fear,
says,
but
but
a
he says certain
respect of
things
him.
though. He
Yeah,
says certain
no,
things though
he's
because
very suspect.
he says things like "peace is a lie," which in Star Wars Legends is a part of the Sith code, and
Interesting.
yeah, it's the last statement. I believe it's the last statement or the first statement of the Sith code. And
Interesting.
so that whole like exchange between her and him, where he goes, "Remember, peace is," and then she finishes his sentence and goes, "Yes, yes, peace is a lie."
Yes.
And so it seems that he is more on board with the dogma than she is, because
Right.
it sounds like we were talking about before. It seems like that Sith are means to an end for her,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
Keimer seems like he's a little bit more
He's a
on.
devotee. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was
Um,
interesting. Uh,
so
and and
let's
he's
put the
also
cards on the
very,
table real quick.
yeah, yeah,
The feeling out in the community is that Keimer might possibly be, and isn't, it's just one of the theories right now, is that Keimer might possibly be the Sith Lord himself.
yeah,
Um,
which would
I
be
like
very,
that
very
idea.
interesting.
I like that idea, but I also don't. It feels too easy in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like that there's something about him that's suspect, because later on, she comes in to attack him, and he handily puts her up against the wall. And so I was just like, there's definitely something about this guy that is more than he lets on. So
Well, and yeah, there's there's other things too that other people have called out. Like, for example, when she comes in to get the poison in order to kill Master Torben, he he is the one who suggests poison, and he's the one who
mhm,
suggests an alternate, finding an alternate method, finding something to do, and he
right.
almost explicitly tells her to prey upon his, like he says, give him the thing that only you can offer, which is absolution.
Absolution. Yeah.
And that's, it's very interesting in terms of if he is the Sith Lord and if he's grooming May to become his apprentice,
Yeah.
either as the apprentice or as the Sith Master, depending on who he is in terms of the Sith hierarchy. That's a very interesting moment, and I think that it would be very cool if he is the Sith Lord and that he is secretly training May, and May isn't even aware
Right.
that Timer is the Sith Lord, or
Yeah.
possibly. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's no, because I was about to say that May could know that Keimer is the Sith Lord, but then there's something later on in the episode that basically absolutely says that she doesn't,
Yeah.
and so, um, so yeah, I don't know, but I do like
No,
the
it's
theory. It's a fun theory.
no, I
It's
don't.
a fun one to, again. It's one of those things
Yeah.
where I would be, it would be cool, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't
It's
be
cool either
disappointed
way.
if I'm not,
Yeah.
if it's not him, because
Yeah. It's cool either
a
way.
character can be a character without being a Sith
Right.
Lord,
Yes.
and so like I think that it's just one of those things where it's just a fun theory. It's a very,
Yeah.
because he's a very disarming, very charismatic character,
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
and having him be the Sith Lord would be very on par with what we would expect of a Sith Lord of this time.
Right.
Very, very disarming, very
Hmm.
nondescript, very on the fringe, but also
Yeah.
very normal. And
Yeah,
so
it can blend
it's not
in
overly
very
unique.
easily into anywhere. So
And so
yeah, no, and I
so
think that's what's
it's
interesting about
it's
him.
cool.
And he is a fun character. There's a moment when they we're kind of skipping ahead a little bit because I do want to get back here in a minute. But there's a moment where the Jedi confront him,
Hmm.
and he had said something to, well, you know what, let's skip backwards because I don't want to skip right here because it plays into something that we first have to talk about. So
Okay.
she gets the poison from Keimer, goes in
Hmm.
back to the Jedi Temple, and then um puts it down in front of Torben and tells him either you can confess your crimes to the Jedi Council, or you can ask me for forgiveness. And and he comes out of his vow, out of his trance
Yeah.
and everything, and like obviously that was something he needed to hear.
Yeah.
And so he reaches out, grabs the poison, drinks it immediately. But before that, he says, "Forgive me. We thought we were doing the right thing,"
Hmm.
which is like, what the hell did they do?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is again just another aspect of this whole mystery that just it's like layers upon layers of mystery here. And every time we get something like we feel like we're getting somewhere, we're getting nowhere, which is
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Like this is what's great about the early parts of a season like this is that this is what you want. You want a lot of intrigue and mystery and stuff, and you want a lot of questions that will hopefully get answered satisfyingly by the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And
So
yeah, we don't want to lost ourselves.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
it's yeah. I mean, it's for me that was a big like what the fuck moment
yeah, yeah,
because there's to do that to yourself, and that's what you
yeah,
needed, and because he put himself into the bearish vow for 10 years, and what he needed was forgiveness from May or someone
yeah.
from whatever for
That's what
whatever
he
the
felt he
Jedi
needed.
did
Yeah,
on Brendok.
yeah.
And that was his life complete, or that the guilt weighed so heavily on him that
That
he
even
did not
after 10
feel
years, nothing
that
abated that.
even with forgiveness, he wanted to end it. So
Yeah.
like something bad, very bad,
Yeah.
happened on
Yeah.
Brendok, which
Yeah.
we see parts of it in the next episode, but there's still unanswered questions.
Oh, very
And
much so.
and
And we will
so
get into that in our next episode as well.
yes,
So
exactly. Yeah, we'll
stay
be talking
tuned for
about
that.
episode 3 for next time. But
Yeah.
it was a very powerful moment for me watching the show that Torben did that. And I find his last words very interesting.
Hmm.
Uh that we thought we were doing the right thing. And it plays into some of my theories that I have after watching the third episode. And
Yeah.
so I'll be able to get into those once we start a discussion on that. But I think those words are very important, especially since it is one of the only clues that we get inside of this episode in terms of what happened in the past versus what is
Right.
happening now. And and so that was a very very interesting thing.
Yeah.
But otherwise, in terms of this episode, I don't have too much else to talk about beyond that.
No,
A
I
lot
wanted to
of
get back to the Keimer thing real
yeah,
quick.
mm-hmm,
Because she does once she's done that, she goes back to well, they the Jedi get there, they realize, okay, well, what happened? There's no struggle. He just took the poison willingly. Why? So they have their questions. And then it leads into them deciding um how to find out from this guy what's going on. And so they decide to send May in to look, or not May, Osha in to look like May and to see what she
mm-hmm,
can find out from Keimer. And it leads to some fun stuff. There's a few really funny moments
yeah.
in this
We'll let
section
you watch
because
the episode if you haven't watched it yet.
well, well,
Um,
I do want to bring up the one point though, which was funny and is was a lot of fun for me in terms of
Mhm.
the interaction, because he Keimer says something to May about somebody he just calls he. Um, and before he quote unquote realizes that it's Osha, not May. And then she's got her pip droid on her chest, so she's recording and um to the Jedi, they can hear what's going on. So they rush in and find out and confront Keimer, and Soul says, who is he? And then Keimer looks over to Yord and goes, I thought he was with you. Um, and it just was a great funny moment. You have to watch it to really get it. I'm not doing it justice at all, but it was just a funny moment that I just enjoyed. Like, this Manny Jacinto's work in this episode is really fantastic. So um it's
Yeah.
just I wanted to bring that up as a fun moment, because even amongst all of this intrigue and stuff like that, they're doing the good thing about doing what Star Wars does best and doing this mixing of tones and everything, and it's just solid writing. So
Yeah.
the
And
only go ahead.
uh, real quick, I was just going to mention that you reminded me of something that is important in that scene.
Okay.
Is that in terms of the Keimer theory, the theory that he is the Sith Lord,
Hmm.
it's a very interesting amount of knowledge that he provides to Osha, but without really
Yes.
telling her anything. In
Yeah.
terms of, he mentions a he, but does not explain who he is or
Right.
how important he is or anything like that. And so
Right.
during that moment when Soul does ask him who is he, and he very easily deflects that
Yes.
question with a joke, it's a very interesting moment, which it disarms the audience just as much as it disarms the characters in the scene.
Right.
and and I think that that's intentional. I think that
Oh, very
the
much. Yeah.
idea that he was using that to deflect the question and not answer the question is very telling, and also very telling that the Jedi didn't even notice it. And
Right.
so that was interesting. Also, to the point that it seems like later in the episode they don't keep him in custody, from what I
Yeah,
could
yeah.
tell. They just kind of
Yeah,
let him
exactly.
go, which is
Yeah, they
insane
just
to me
well, but they let
in
him
terms of
go,
how the Jedi have
but the
acted so
Jedi
far.
but the Jedi on Olega are supposed to be watching him. Um
Oh, right,
and
you are right.
so
Yes,
and
yes,
then,
that is true.
then they escape
Yeah, and then he makes the slip.
him. Yeah, he slips past them, grabs May, and then they are then now on their way to another planet where they're going to find the third Jedi that they are wanting to confront, which is the Wookiee Kelnaka.
Hmm.
So, which is great because that's played by I'm probably going to butcher the name, but Junis Suetomo, who is the actor who has been playing Chewbacca in all of the um,
In the sequels,
Disney era, the
yeah,
Disney era stuff.
as well as
He
Solo.
was, yeah, Solo, and
Solo.
the sequel trilogy. So he took over from Peter Mayhew, who died after Force Awakens came out,
Hmm.
because Peter Mayhew was in Force Awakens, but he doubled for him in Force Awakens. So he took over, but this is his first chance at having his own character, which is great. So, but and it looks like it'll be a fun character. We get
Yeah,
a
we
little
see
bit
a
of
little
it
bit more of him in the third episode,
in the
and
third
I can
episode.
already
Yeah.
tell that he is a different character and he has a different personality and
Hmm.
weight
Yeah.
to him in terms of being a
Yeah.
Wookiee but not being
We'll
Chewbacca.
definitely. Yeah.
And so,
And we'll definitely get more into that in our next episode. But
mhm.
yeah, that's all I have for this one. These two episodes, I watched both of these at least three times in preparation for this, just because it
I've
was
watched
like,
them twice.
yeah, well, I watched it a third time just before we were going to record, because I really wanted to kind of, you know, write some notes down and make sure that I was hitting the things that we wanted to talk about, because there were things that just things that from our perspectives, either people weren't talking about or things that we really had talked about between each other before we recorded and really
Yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
talk about a little bit more in depth. And so it's just this is definitely an intriguing show. And I'm hopeful that it's going to continue along this path. And just be a just be a fun show in general.
Yeah, so far in terms of the Disney Plus shows, this is one of my most engaging,
Yeah.
most engaging shows in terms of the comparison to other Disney Plus Star Wars shows.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know what happens every episode that comes out. I'm excited for Tuesday to learn more. I'm hoping on Tuesday we get some more answers to a lot of the burning questions that I have and a lot of the theories that I have on what's going on.
Right.
And that's what's fun. That's what's fun about this Star Wars show is that I think that as long as you're having fun with it and that you are theorizing it, and ultimately that's kind of the measure of how fun something is to you as a person, no matter if it's Star Wars or something else. How much time do you spend while not doing that thing thinking about that thing?
Right.
And I think that that is definitely not a non-considerable amount of time for me with the Acolyte, and so
Right.
I'm definitely having fun with it, and I'm excited to watch some more.
Oh yeah.
There are shows that Disney Plus has put out that I have not thought about too much in terms of my day to day. But this
Right.
one I do think about quite a lot, and it's actually gotten me to want to do things like this, like the podcast, as well as
Right.
be a little more vocal on Twitter
Yeah.
and join the conversation about it.
Right. Right. All right. Yeah. So I mean, stay tuned. We're gonna try and get these up every week, a few days after the new episode drops. Obviously we're a little bit behind at the moment, but we'll catch up and we will get these out as quickly as possible. The regular episodes of the series of this podcast might not be weekly after this point. It'll probably be more like monthly. But depending on schedules, we'll see what works for us. Um, but yeah, stay tuned, and we hope you'll come back and keep listening and hear our thoughts. In the meantime, Harrison, do you want to let people know where they can find you online? So if they want
Yeah,
to talk to you more?
absolutely. If you guys want to talk to me, the best source is probably going to be to at me on Twitter at Saber Vista, spelled how you would think. And well, I guess actually maybe not how you would think. It's Saber, not Sabre, depending on your spelling of saber. Uh,
Yes. So
and
Sabervista.
yes, yes.
So
So if you want to follow me there and talk to me there, I would love to join you guys in some conversation about the Acolyte or just Star Wars in general. You also see me post occasionally about Star Wars gaming. I've been mostly talking about Armada and a couple of the other things lately. I haven't really joined on the hype train for Star Wars Outlaws just yet, but I know that there's a lot of talk about it. So if anybody
yeah.
wants to talk about that, then I would love to talk about that too.
All
And
right.
and yeah, you can also occasionally find uploads on my YouTube channel, which is also at Saber Vista. I think there's a hyphen between Saber and Vista in that for YouTube. Uh, but otherwise, it should be the same place. And I think that's the two best sources. I also have an Instagram if you want to see the occasional post up there of Star Wars trading cards and Star Wars models. That's where I post all that stuff.
All right. And you can find me at Geek Thulu. You can just go to geekthulu.com and all of my links are there. That's GeekThulu. Obviously, we both have weird names that need to spell out for you guys. But yeah, go to geekthulu.com. And all of my links are there. And also check out creepyandgeeky.com. This series is presented by Creepy and Geeky, which is my main podcast. And this is just kind of like a spin-off of that in a way, because that's kind of where we started podcasting from. So go to creepyandgeeky.com, and I will have links to all the show's episodes going forward from there as well. So all right, well,
All right,
thank you
everybody.
guys for listening, and well, we hope we'll see you next time.
Yep. May the force be with you.
Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. You can follow the podcast by going to creepyandgeeky.com and clicking on any of the social links. If you'd like to follow me, you can find my links at geekthulu.com. You can follow Harrison on Twitter at SaberVista. All of the links are in the show notes.